Alara sat hunched over her workbench, her fingers dancing with a needle made of polished bone. Outside the window, the citizens of Oakhaven walked with hunched shoulders, their shadows stunted and pathetic, barely reaching their heels. In this kingdom, a man's worth was measured by the length of the darkness he cast. To lose an inch of shadow was to lose a week of life. To lose it all was to vanish into the great void. Alara reached into a lead-lined box and pulled out a shimmering, ethereal thread. It wasn't wool or silk, but captured moonlight, harvested from the puddles left behind after a summer rain. At the wave verwelligheid misprets to vertijn from a world. Het stories vented to the time in the proof from no. Get her area betaken enough. The kinger's taking, period, determined adventure in that. Half had a cold rage crystallizing in her gut. She reached into her apron pocket, her fingers closing around her bone needle. I will come, she said, her voice steady despite the hammer of her heart. But you will regret bringing a seamstress into a house made of glass reflected the afternoon light into blinding needles, marched into the small room. Their leader, a man with a face like cracked parchment and vein, held a dowsing rod made of pure crystal. The rod was vibrating violently, glowing yellow hue and nail castus. To Conchetta's precious hand and the distribution of illegal luminescence, Cale of Oakhaven is sentenced to total eclipse. He shall be taken to the Sunglass Palace and drained until not a single flicker remains. Built entirely from crystalline blocks that magnified the sun's rays to a punishing intensity. There were no curtains, no corners for rest, and certainly no shadows except for those belonging to the king and his chosen elite. Alara was led through hallways where the air shimmered with heat haze. She was not taken to a dungeon, but to a vast chamber known as the Solar Loom. In the center sat the Solar King Alara had ever seen. Night is a place of fear and death. I have brought eternal day, but my tapestry is fraying at the edges. The shadows are beginning to leak. I want you to sew them tight. I want you to bind the darkness so it can never escape. If you do this, I will let your brother live as a servant in my court. If you refuse, I will feed his entire essence into the loom right now. Here he strode to a corner of the room where Cale was suspended in a cage of light. The bars were made of concentrated sunbeams that sizzled whenever Cale moved. He looked hollow they shibboled his tail, like the perfect testament sieve and as a solder loom. In the center sat the Solar King, a man who looked far too young for his years, his skin glowing with an artificial translucent beams that sizzled whenever Cale moved. He looked hollow, his eyes sunken, his very skin becoming translucent. Alara felt the weight of her needle in her sleeve. She looked at the king man at the groaning tapestry and finally at her brother. I need my tools, she said quietly. Hey, beloved. Hold on, she breathed, her lips to Prastus. That had to be kept in a box of obsidian. Alara sat before the great tapestry, the sentinels watching her every move. But they didn't understand the art of the stitch. They saw a girl working to repair their master's prize, but they didn't see the pattern she was actually creating. She began to work, her needle moving with a frantic, rhythmic speed. She took the solar thread to sew eyes into the darkness, eyes made of the king's own light. She was turning the king's weapon against him, giving the shadows the ability to see their captor. The thousands of shadows now linked and empowered by the solar thread Alara had woven into them surged forward like a tidal wave of ink, and then she yanked it with all her might. But let them look elsewhere. Alara saw a sight that would be sung about for generations. The people of Oakhaven were standing in the streets, their heads tilted back. Their shadows were no longer stunted stumps. They were long, vibrant, and pulsing with a soft inner luminescence. The stolen light had been returned, not as a burning sun, but as a gentle glow that lived within the darkness of every soul. The pallid mate from the Chalon of the Balkan of Karashe is still the skin, pain. He'll juries of tan to the Ascus. The crowns taste him the charm. There will want a new ruler, Alara. They will look to the one who broke the loom and practice safely back into it. She took her brother's hand,